Welcome to the Painting Lines Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things tennis. Join Erik and Aidan in their discussion for updates on news and pop culture, and from hot takes to betting, they've got you covered.
Ready? Play.
Welcome back to Painting Lines. Last week we caught up with former ATP pro Justin Gimelstob discussing the current news in tennis, and this week we're going to be giving a recap of the second Masters 1000 event of the summer, the Cincinnati Masters. So Erik, do you have any initial thoughts at the end of this tournament?
Yeah, initial thoughts. I mean, there is an abnormally high amount of walkovers. Is that just me, or did you notice that too?
I definitely agree. I think that was something we saw a lot of in this tournament. And I think it kind of goes into what we've been talking about over the last few weeks, which is the fatigue aspect. We're late in the season now, so you're seeing these guys kind of making a tactical decision like, okay, the US Open's coming up and my body's breaking down. So if they start to feel a little bit of something, they may just pack it in and kind of let that match go for the larger match to come in the US Open.
Yeah, got to be more cautious. No sense in pushing a little nagging injury that could turn into something worse. Yeah, no, I mean, I thought it was a great tournament overall. I mean, final was amazing.
I think that might have been the match of the year. I think it might have been better than the Wimbledon final, to be honest.
It's close. Only because Wimbledon's a slam. You know what I mean?
Wimbledon is a slam,
and Wimbledon. Also, it's not just any slam.
It's the biggest tournament of the year, but I think in terms of match quality, I think this was like the best match of the year. It is also tough because obviously in Grand Slam you get more tennis. Yeah. So you're going to see more impressive shots. You're going to see just a larger amount of it. But I think in terms of like the proportion of points and games that were really intense, I think this was probably the match of the year for me.
Yeah, I mean, we're also seeing a legitimate rivalry being formed too.
Exactly. I mean, that was something I was kind of going to get into later, but these guys have met 4 times now, and none of their matches have really disappointed. I mean, I guess the only one you really could say was disappointing was the French Open, because obviously Alcaraz had that issue with cramping, and so the last couple sets weren't as tight. But if you look at just the first 2 sets of that match, it was some spectacular tennis.
Yeah. So what did you see in the early rounds?
I mean, kicking things off in the first round, the round of 64, there was really nothing that shocking. There was like one upset, and it was a guy we've been talking about a lot in the last couple of weeks. Monfils beat Norrie in the first round. And while it's not super shocking after seeing Monfils make this run into the quarters in Canada, I still think it's really impressive because obviously Norrie is a really high-ranked player. And I mean, right now, Monfils is ranked, in the mid-hundreds, maybe even in the 200s.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to see him have a huge win against Norrie and then get kind of smoked by Djokovic. Like, is it that big of a difference? I guess so.
I think it is, because if you were going to have a match between Norrie and Djokovic, you would take Djokovic about 99% of the time, to be honest.
I know. It's crazy how skewed the quality is, or I guess the talent you see like between the top 2 and then maybe the players ranked 2 to 15 and then beyond. Like, you can kind of group players in with each other. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think that's one cool thing that you see in kind of the ranking. You look at the point distribution and it's like Alcaraz and Djokovic. And then you have maybe Medvedev, I think, is a little bit on his own. And then you have maybe Tsitsipas through Rune, or Rune through Tsitsipas now, I think, because Tsitsipas dropped down a good amount, I'm pretty sure. So you have maybe Rune through Tsitsipas is a different category. And then you have like Fritz through maybe Hurkacz or someone. And then you get into kind of the 20s and it starts to be a little bit more of a mix where it's like you could have a guy where, I expect that guy like to do decent at every tournament, but not necessarily have any massive wins. Or you have guys in that area where it's like, this guy might pull out a massive win, but he also might just do nothing.
Yeah, no, I know. And then kind of going off that, it's interesting to see how over time players will move from like group to group. Like, you know how Deminar comes to mind, like he was kind of in the bottom half of players. Now I would kind of put him as, one of those 2 through 15 ish. You know what I mean? He fluctuates, He
jumped from probably that area of this guy might get a massive result, but he also might lose in the first round, to after that run at Canada, you kind of are thinking this guy maybe is up to that level where you're going to expect a deeper run from him in every tournament. But then again, that was a one-time tournament. He lost pretty early in Cincinnati, so
yeah.
you can't be too intense about it after one result. You kind of have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think most players get their big breakout at a Grand Slam.
Can you give me like an example?
Yeah, I mean Shelton obviously, and then I think Tommy Paul also comes to mind too when he had that run in the Australian Open and then the US Open last year too. I think he made it to I want to say the quarters, but I think that's what made him a household name. Someone who was considered a top American tennis player.
Yeah, I know. I mean, kind of like Tiafoe. Tiafoe had a breakout
Yeah.
in the US Open last year, making it to what, the semifinals?
Yeah, semifinals.
So that's really impressive run, and that kind of bolstered him and pushed him up to that top 10 level that he is right now. But yeah, another thing about Monfils getting that victory in the first round, obviously was the only real upset from that round, but we've talked about how he's considering retirement. Do you think that his mindset is shifting at this point from, I kind of want to conserve because I don't know how much longer I'm going to play, to, oh, I'm thinking about retiring, now I got to go all out because I won't be playing for that much longer?
I think the latter of what you said. I think he's putting it all out there because he knows there's not a lot of time left.
That seems like it makes sense because obviously this is his entire life. It's been what he's been doing for 38 years or 36 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's going to squeeze every ounce that he has left out of it. He doesn't want to go into his retirement and be like, I could have done more.
There's probably no worse regret than thinking like, oh, I could have done more. And so he's just making it to the point where I don't know if he will make a serious run in the US Open, but at least these little tournaments, we're getting the flashes of what we used to see, and that's always reassuring.
100%. So let's move on to the round of 32. And it's kind of funny because you go from the round of 64, there were pretty much no upsets, to all of a sudden in the round of 32. I mean, it was a completely different story in terms of the upsets and the matches. There were 15 matches played. Popyrin had a walkover against Jari, but out of those 15 matches, there were 8 upsets. So more than half of the matches were the underdog won. And I kind of grouped these in terms of like the categories. You had Lajovic over Sinner and Monfils over de Minaur. Obviously, de Minaur and Sinner were in the final in Canada. So I'm like, were these both just fatigue losses? Like, these guys played obviously super deep into this tournament, and then they come in immediately in the next week and lose early. That seems like it might be the cause. Then you go into Mannarino over FAA. And I mean, to me, that one is just like FAA isn't in great form. But
I don't know how this guy Mannarino does it.
I mean, Mannarino just gets it done, dude. I mean, he won in Newport, and he made like a good run in that tournament he played against Mallorca.
Yeah.
They played in the final, I think. But I grouped it with Wawrinka over Tiafoe just because those are both kind of veterans beating highly ranked guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just looking at these matches. I'm like, you would kind of expect the younger guys to be fresher this late in the season. Like, Wawrinka and Mannarino are older dudes. You wouldn't really expect them at the midway of the summer or the dog days of summer, them to be the ones pulling out these wins. But yeah, I guess is what you saw. Then there were just shockers, which were Purcell over Ruud and Ruusuvuori over Rublev. Did not see him coming at all, really.
Yeah, well, Ruusuvuori played lights out. Credit to him. It wasn't like Rublev played down. I think Ruusuvuori really played up. But going back to what you were saying earlier, I would cut Sinner and de Minaur some slack because, like you said, they were in the final. And this kind of goes back to what Justin was saying last week, how when you win a tournament and then go to the next one, you're late. You know, you have the least amount of rest. You show up late. You're just kind of out of whack. So write that off. I can't speak on Ruud though or Tiafoe. That's just kind of out of character for both of them.
Yeah, I mean, Ruud hasn't played that excellently. He had that one run after the French Open, but
still, he's usually all right. If this was grass, I would say, yeah, chalk it up to the court. But
no, what I'm saying is I think he's just not playing great recently.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah.
Just because like he had one good run, but since the French Open, he really hasn't done that much.
Too many weekend concerts.
Yeah. I think it may be a situation where he took his foot a little bit off the gas after the French. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I'm going to go into Wimbledon. I don't have high expectations. And now he's trying to sort of put the pressure back on, but it's so late in the season now. He's going to have to flip into it the next gear come the US Open.
Maybe he needed that, though. Maybe he was getting a little burnt out, and this kind of slump that he's in is believe it or not, maybe better for his mental health. Maybe he's taking matches less seriously. He's not getting as worked up. But I think there will come a time where it is going to start affected negatively. It's an interesting point of view. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but just trying to give him the benefit of the doubt here.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like Justin was saying last week, there's a level where if you keep playing in matches and losing in matches, you kind of get used to that loss. It's not like you have a losing mindset, like you don't go in expecting to lose, but you're not as frustrated maybe by the loss as you would have been if you had been playing lights out. So I think maybe that's a negative of not being fully locked in coming into these matches. And then the last couple were just McDonald over Rune. Obviously, Rune was one of the guys that pulled out. Maybe was it an injury? I hope it wasn't a serious injury. I'd like to see him playing in the U.S. Open. The last one was Hurkacz over Coric. Technically, it's an upset, but really it's not. It's like Hurkacz is the lower seed technically right now, but really, I think actually he might be above him again after this tournament.
It's that close.
Because yeah, the ranking points he got from Cincinnati put him back over the top.
Yeah,
but
I guess Coric is sneaky.
Yeah, at the point of that match, Coric was the higher ranked player.
Yeah. Did you see who was it against? Hurkacz's between the leg shot?
I did not see it.
Go check it out after, dude. It was awesome.
But yeah, this kind of showed to me why the summer tennis is like some of the best of the year. I've been talking about this last 3 episodes. You just get these unexpected results. You get crazy mix-ups. You start seeing players in matchups that you haven't seen before. Like I hadn't seen Ruusuvuori make really that deep of a run, and now all of a sudden he shows up and he's in the round of 16 at Masters 1000, and you're like, I wonder if this guy's going to make a deeper run. But yeah, so going into the round of 16, we had some interesting matchups, I guess. Alcaraz versus Tommy Paul. That was my bet of the week last week. And Tommy Paul, unfortunately, didn't pull out the bet for me, but it was a close matchup. And what's interesting to me about this match was Alcaraz now has had like 6 straight 3-set matches. Actually, I think after the final, it might be 7. So he's not like dominating his opponents.
So he's human after all.
Well, yes and no, because it's not like he's losing matches.
Yeah.
He's just not dominating like you might expect from the number 1 guy in the world.
Is part of him not dominating because other players are getting used to his playing style and knowing how to play him better? Or is his quality of play decreasing in these because of what we're saying about the summer tennis, the summer fatigue?
Well, I think it's hard to say. I think it's hard to say that his quality is decreasing after watching how he played in that final. I think there is an element of his style that if you're obviously an incredible player, it takes an incredible player to be able to exploit any aspect of his game because he's great at everything. But one thing I did see in the final that kind of stood out to me is Alcaraz does seem to play a very defensive game, at least in that final he did. Like he's not afraid to take offense if the other person's playing defensive, but against someone like Djokovic, I think he does a great job of kind of understanding his opponent's strengths and weaknesses because with Djokovic, how was he beating Djokovic in that final? Really, what I saw was Alcaraz playing defensive on the baseline, a little bit behind the baseline actually, and saying, Djokovic, yeah, you can take the offense because Djokovic is a crazy good counterpuncher. And Alcaraz was like, I'm just going to sit back and counterpunch too, but I'm also 15 years younger than you. So if we just keep playing super long points, eventually I'm going to break you down.
Well, and that's exactly what happened. I think it was, you can also say Djokovic, there was something going on with him the first set. He had some kind of heat stroke or he was not himself. I think that's also a big reason why he was beating him. Like you saw how disheveled he looked out there. He had to take a 5-minute break in between sets and then he got broken the second time around. I don't know. I don't think Alcaraz was doing that much special things against Djokovic. I think it is a lot of Djokovic's fitness that was struggling.
But I think that was part of Alcaraz's strategy.
I think
Alcaraz was playing, if you watched a lot of those points, they were having a bunch of really long, not super intense rallies at a lot of the portions where it was just oh, backhand, 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 backhand.
Hmm.
And it's just the longer that rally goes on, I think the more Alcaraz gets an advantage because he has 15 years. He's 15 years younger. So he's going to be
Yeah.
not as affected by a super long rally as Djokovic is.
Yeah. No, I see that. And then kind of going back to what we were talking about before, the question I posed about are players able to play Alcaraz better? Something I noticed in this tournament is the thing that separates him the most from other players is his ability to make just fantastic abnormal plays. You know what I mean? Like his strategy is pretty simple as far as, he's very aggressive with the drop shot, which if you play him enough times or watch him, you can anticipate when it's coming. But, if you hit a ripper down the line and he just hits his split slide backhand and passes you, you can't do anything about that, which most players aren't able to do. So I think he's able to make the harder plays, but his overall game isn't that much better than everyone else's.
That was one thing I was talking about last week.
Uh-huh.
Was he's able to take shots that you would expect to be defensive, and I brought up the fact that the other big three can do this too. Like you see it. It's a classic Nadal move. It's a classic Djokovic move. Taking a shot that you would expect to be defensive, and all of a sudden he plays it for a winner.
Yeah. And it's crazy because the other person thinks they just hit a winner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then 360.
Yeah. But so, I mean, the other match that I wanted to focus on from the round of 16, just going back a little bit, was Zverev beating Medvedev.
Mm,
Obviously, that was your match of the week last week, unfortunately.
that was my bet of the week.
Your bet of the week, yes. It was close, but Zverev takes it, and it breaks his losing streak against Medvedev. To me, this signals maybe that finally Zverev is all the way back from that injury he got in the French Open last year.
Yeah, I mean that's good to see. I think it's also yes, him coming back from injury and then him also I guess being more mentally resilient against Medvedev because you saw in those matches earlier, which is why I took Medvedev in this match because I thought that he was just going to break down Zverev mentally like he always does with his on and off court shenanigans for lack of a better word. And Medvedev just put it right to him this time. Or sorry, Zverev just put it right to him this time. And yeah, I mean, he looks freaking good now, man. I'm excited for him in the US Open because now we have a lot more competition with Djokovic back, Zverev's coming back from injury and hopefully Rude could pick it up, but these are like veteran guys that we're going to see battle it out in this US Open.
100%. Speaking of veteran guys, the only other match of note that I took away from the round of 16 really was Novak beating Monfils for the 19th straight time.
Oh,
Just gotta feel bad for Monfils. Just this guy literally has all the answers.
maybe Monfils shouldn't retire until he beats Djokovic
Just
once.
yeah, just never retire, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, then going into kind of the quarters and the semis, to be honest, didn't really have any shocks to me. Like, seemed like there was relative comfortability, except for Alcaraz, to be honest. Alcaraz didn't dominate. He continued to not dominate. Didn't dominate Purcell, didn't dominate Hurkacz. Hurkacz was actually a tiebreak away from beating Alcaraz. Like we were saying, while Alcaraz is winning these matches, he's not performing at a next level in terms of just crushing these guys.
Yeah, because I remember I was at Miami Open 2022 and I actually saw Alcaraz and Hurkacz play, and Alcaraz dominated him. Like it was kind of a bummer because it was a night match. I only had one match. I only had one ticket. It wasn't like a grounds pass deal, and the match was over in probably an hour.
Ooh.
Drove an hour out there, watched him get pummeled for an hour, and then drove an hour home.
Feels bad.
Yeah.
That's a tough break.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, then
That would have been a good name for a podcast.
tough break. Could have been.
Yeah.
But then coming into the final, obviously, we've already talked about it a little bit. I'm going to give a little bit of a brief match recap.
Go for it. Get very vivid. I don't want you to miss a detail.
Yeah. If you didn't get to watch this final, I'd 100% recommend. There are 12-minute highlights on YouTube somewhere, so go watch it. Early in the match, Djokovic looked good, went up early, got an early break, went up 4-2, but then he was immediately broken back, and Alcaraz goes on a 5-1 game run, takes the first set 7-5. Alcaraz breaks Djokovic early in the second, and Djokovic, like you were saying, he started to break down. He looked like he was struggling with the conditions. He needed like ice and the trainers and all this stuff. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden comes out and just breaks back. Like, do you have any idea like what that was? Like, how did he manage to pull off that turnaround in terms of his mentality?
So my guess is when they first started, I think they were saying it felt like 90 plus degrees out on the court. And once the game or the match continued on, the sun started setting, it became evening. There was a little more shade on the court. And I think that made all the difference for Novak. I mean, you saw him just flip a switch because in the first set, by the end of the first set, he was not even going for some balls. He was feet in the mud, stuck. And then, like you said, sitting down, hands in his face, ice on his back, just looked miserable. So, I mean, he also got a little bit of a break. So maybe he pounded some electrolytes, got the AC, really cooled his body down. And then he just went into complete beast mode.
100%. Breaks back, gets into the tiebreak. They traded mini breaks in the tiebreak, which was pretty cool to see. I mean, like Djokovic goes up in the tiebreak, then Alcaraz gets it back. And Alcaraz gets a match point actually in that second set on Djokovic's serve, but unfortunately for him, didn't convert it. But to me, I think there should almost be a different name for a match point on someone else's serve. Like, I don't like not really like a massive thing, just in terms of like stat keeping, because when you look at that stat later, you're like, oh, Alcaraz had a match point, he didn't convert. But when you look at the percentages of like how often people win points on their serve versus on their opponent's serve, there should almost be like a break match point or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great observation right there that I didn't notice until you brought that up. And I like the name break match point.
Yeah, I
Was
mean,
thinking of other like creative names
yeah,
you could think of.
you can just be pretty
But
simple with it, I think.
yeah, so they don't track the stat
I don't
that
think
you know
so.
of at least.
Yeah, I was looking at stats from that match later, and they have match points, but they don't have like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting because like obviously Alcaraz had one match point, and so they're like, oh, he was 0 for 1 on match points, but it was Djokovic's serve. Like he wasn't really expected to win that point.
Yeah.
Versus when Djokovic was serving and couldn't serve it out, that's a little different. Like
So,
Alcaraz had to break back to stop Djokovic from winning those match points.
right, right. As far as other sports, do you think tennis is behind, even, or exceeds other sports with the interpretation of like data analytics to help players? You know what I mean? Because you see in the NFL the whole Amazon.
Like the analysis of like, oh, the likelihood they make this catch or the likelihood of making that throw and stuff like that.
Yeah. But I don't think that really helps players. It just kind of is an interesting thing to watch as fans. Whereas as players, you could be Alcaraz's coach, and if you kept track of that stat that you were saying, break match points, you can kind of work that into your practice and say, okay, we're not converting on match points when we're on the break. Like, what can we do to win points when we're not on serve? What can we do as the returner? Like, where should we be hitting our returns? So that'd be pretty interesting to keep track of.
I bet they do have some pretty intense analytics because I'm sure if they just have someone watching a match back, they can be like, okay, you had an approach shot here. If you take an approach shot up the line, you win it 60% of the time. If you take it cross court, you win it 53% of the time. So we recommend like, unless they're really heavily favoring that down the line shot, you go cross, or unless they're really favoring that cross court shot, you go down the line with it. So I'm sure they have stats like that. I'm sure they have people on that stuff, but it's not really shown, I think, as much to the fans. I think there is stuff though where they're like, oh, these are where they're serving the ball. This is how their toss looks. They have stuff like that. So I think they're probably about even, but I think sometimes we always want to see more analytics. It's always fun to see a chart telling you, oh, this is how the breakdown of this point goes.
Yeah, and what I was thinking of earlier was Amazon Next Gen Stats.
Okay,
that rings a bell, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, so Djokovic took that second set in the tiebreak, and then he actually breaks to go up in the third, and he's up 5-3. So he has the chance to first break to take the match, gets multiple match points, including a point of the match and maybe one of the points of the year. I mean, that match point, I think it was at 40-30, where they're just running all around the court, coming up to the net, sliding. Alcaraz makes that beautiful sliding push up the line shot. Just a spectacular point. And just continuing tense game after tense game. Alcaraz holds serve. Djokovic goes on serve, gets another chance to take the match. He was almost broken early on in his service game, battles back, gets a chance to take the match, double faults on match point, gets another chance to take the match and loses it again, and eventually loses the game. So this was just tense, no matter who you were rooting for. And then finally, you get into that third set tiebreak, and Djokovic finally pulls away at 4-4 and takes the match. Just a spectacular match to watch.
So who were you rooting for?
I was rooting for Djokovic, to be completely honest.
Me too.
But
to be completely honest, there was a point where I was rooting for Alcaraz because it was during the second set tiebreak, and I was really hungry and I wanted to go get dinner, but the match was still on and I didn't want to leave and miss the match. And then once it went into the third set, I couldn't wait, so I literally brought my iPad to the restaurant so I could watch the match.
People looking over like, dude, this guy is just such a nerd, just with his iPad at the table.
I know. Headphones and everything.
Yeah, just an iPad kid right there.
Yeah. Oh man, the worst. But yeah, after that, once I went to the third, I was all Djokovic.
Yeah. But yeah, like I talked about, Djokovic being the aggressor and Alcaraz the counterpuncher. But one of the big things I noticed, no easy breaks in this match. Djokovic converted 3 of 16 break points, and Alcaraz converted 4 out of 10. So it wasn't like, oh, they got 3 break points and they won 2 of them. It was the likelihood they broke in those chances was not super high.
Yeah.
Another thing I noticed was, did you see Alcaraz's strategy on some of Djokovic's second serves?
No. Well, as far as what?
He was stepping in so far and taking some of these second serves like from no man's land, like 3 feet inside the baseline. And
was he following them up or no?
It kind of reminded me of Federer's saber strategy, where it's like, oh, you sneak attack and come in when the guy's not expecting it. But it was just, to me, kind of showed that Alcaraz had no fear for Djokovic, because really taking a serve from like that far in is kind of disrespectful to your opponent. It's like, I don't respect your second serve enough to have to take it behind the baseline. So I'm just going to step up like super far into the court and take this on the rise. And I think it really just showed that Alcaraz has ridiculous confidence.
Yeah, I agree. That is pretty disrespectful to do that. Another thing that's disrespectful to do is this doesn't happen in the pros, but when I play, if someone serves it out and I can catch it with my bare hand, I'll do it.
Yeah. Well, don't do that in a real match, because they'll just be like, oh, that's my point.
Well, no, I mean, it was out.
Oh, after it bounces. Okay.
After it bounces out, instead of having to go behind and shag it, I'll just.
Yeah. Just smooth.
It feels
slide it in the pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed, kind of speaking on adjusting to a fastball coming at you, like Djokovic's net game was impenetrable, to be honest. Like a few times Alcaraz just blasted the ball at him.
Yeah.
And Djokovic was like, boop. and just
I was scared for him because they were not easy shots either.
no,
Like right on
exactly.
the body.
Yeah, and he just like boop. I'm just gonna boop,
Yeah.
get my
Yeah.
racket right there perfectly.
Yeah.
So
I would have liked to see Djokovic maybe not hit one of those volleys and get nailed by the ball and then stare down Alcaraz like he did Nadal. Remember what he did to Nadal that one time he got
yeah,
hit
but that
by
was
him?
different because Nadal hit him with an overhead, right?
No,
Oh,
Nadal
it
hit him with the
wasn't.
backhand.
Oh,
Someone
but
else hit him
he
with
was
an
turned
overhand.
around though, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was something like that. And then he just looked back at Nadal, and Nadal gave him the courtesy wave, and then he just skulled back, turned
Yeah.
away, and then Nadal did his little shrug.
Yeah. I remember that being like slightly different though, because I feel like that those situations was like it was like very obvious the point was over,
Yeah,
and then he
yeah,
gets hit with it. Versus like in these situations, Alcaraz was just hitting like a ball that could have been a passing shot, and he was like, I think it's easier if I just hit the ball as hard as I
yeah.
can right at him.
Right.
But yeah, it's like I was saying, this matchup is delivered for another time. I mean, there's been 4 matchups, 4 exciting matches to watch. Intense 3-setter in Madrid where Alcaraz came out on top. Then obviously the French Open, and then obviously Wimbledon, which was just an instant classic, and then this one, which is just a masterpiece.
Oh, tell me about it. And then after Djokovic wins the match point, when he just collapses to the floor, gets up, shakes his hand, and rips his shirt and lets out a huge roar. That pretty much sums up the whole match right
100%.
there, dude.
Yeah.
Rips it off.
He still had the energy to rip it off. I'm shocked.
Yeah. Well, that was just complete adrenaline right there.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Are
All
you ready to
right.
hop into segments?
Let's do it, man.
So, what's new in
So,
tennis? What'd you see?
what is new in tennis? So, I saw that the US Open will not be live streaming the draw ceremony,
Yeah, I saw
which
that too. Yeah, it's crazy.
apparently it's the only, is it though? Apparently it's the only slam that doesn't stream it, and people are up in arms. People are like complaining about the lack of transparency. They're saying there's going to be match fixing, and I don't know. I think people are just complaining just to complain, right? Going
100%.
taking to Twitter, just complete mistrust in the institutions, which is not great because how are we, if one person just starts spreading misinformation on Twitter and then people just kind of regurgitate what they see on the internet and then repeat it, next thing you know, people are gonna be saying that the US Open was fixed. All because one British journalist tweeted, "Oh, there's such a lack of transparency in the US Open. I can't believe they're not streaming the draw." I
Yeah,
think that's a flop.
I think it's just kind of an example of how a lot of things like it's just about getting clicks and you're trying to draw people to look at your comment. Like, I
I
don't
guess
think
so.
95% of the people would have even known that there
Yeah.
was a draw ceremony if someone hadn't brought it up. And
Yeah.
then everyone's
No,
going to be
you're right.
complaining about it.
You're
So,
so right. You're so right.
and it kind of it builds into mine too a little bit because
Mhm.
mine was this article about Djokovic's possible retirement, right? So that's the
Mhm.
big headline is like, oh, this guy's like, oh,
Yeah, talk
it's a
about
guy that
clickbait.
worked with Djokovic's coach, and he's like, oh, I think Djokovic is only going to play for X amount of time. But when you actually read the article, it says the guy was like, oh, Djokovic may only play for only 2 more years.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Come
dude,
on.
that's a
We all
long
knew
way
that.
away. Like, anything can happen in 2 years. Djokovic could be playing like terribly in a year and a half and retire. We can't know anything that far out. If it was
I
like,
think that's pretty unlikely.
yeah, but it's like if Djokovic could retire at the end of this year, like that would be a headline that would be interesting if someone had
Yeah.
substantiated it. But 2 more years, like that isn't that shocking. Like I'm surprised anyone really wrote about that.
Yeah, seriously. I wonder what the like process of unwinding, like how long that takes from, Pete Djokovic right now winning Wimbledon, or excuse me, not winning Wimbledon, but making it to the Wimbledon final, winning Cincinnati, being a top contender at the US Open, to where in 2 years, he's maybe sitting out because he's injured. He's like Nadal, basically. I wonder
Yeah.
how long it's going to take for him to get to Nadal right now,
I mean,
2023.
Nadal deteriorated pretty quickly. I mean, he won what was the Australian and the French only
Yeah.
all of a sudden he's injured and maybe and next year will probably be his last year. So
Mhm.
to me, it's like Federer. Think of Federer. Federer makes the Wimbledon final in 2019, and then by 2021, like he's on his way out.
Yeah, it all happens so fast, man. You guys gotta appreciate these players while they're here.
Exactly.
I'm not missing a single Djokovic match for the rest of the time he plays.
100%. Yeah, no, I mean, to me, I kind of wrote down this little bit of
Mhm.
hyperbole, but them saying he's only going to play 2 more years kind of was like, to me, it's like, oh, Alcaraz may only play for 15 more years. It's
Yeah, I
like you
know.
throw the only in there. It's like, it kind of sounds like a small amount of time, but it's like, no, it's not at all.
I know. I know. Seriously. So, all right, bet of the week. Who are you taking this week?
I'm taking a prop bet for this week.
Mhm.
Kind of one you took 2 weeks ago. I'm taking Fees versus Nakashima plus 135 for over 2.5 sets. Both these guys are young guys. I think that makes them really hungry for the win. And because of that, I don't think they're going to fade away, even if the match like seems to be getting away from either one of them. And I
Mhm.
think that's a sign that this may be a real good matchup and may go to 3 sets.
Yeah, I like that bet a lot. I'm taking Nakashima as well. Or I'm taking that match, but I'm taking Nakashima minus 110. Just because it was even odds when I saw it. And to be completely honest, I'm going with a gut play here. You know, Nakashima is an American and I want to root for him. So nothing really more to say about that other than go Nakashima.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a tough match, though, because Fees is actually like the youngest guy in the top 100. He's actually ranked 48, so he's higher than Nakashima. So that'll be a tough matchup, I think, for both guys.
I really hope they have that Australian announcer calling the match where he calls him Nakashima. You know what I'm talking about?
I have
That
not
guy's the
seen that,
that
but
guy's the goat.
I just know that
He's probably
Australians
the
have
same guy. Yeah, he's the
quite
same
the
guy who
accent.
said that crazy, what was it?
Oh,
Kangaroo one. Yeah.
wait,
Oh,
the
mongoose,
Federer quote?
mongoose.
The Federer quote. Shout out to this guy, anyone listening, but this is my favorite commentator quote of all time is there's this video of Federer hitting this volley with great reactions, and the commentator goes, and he's got those reflexes like a mongoose on amphetamines. And I'm just
That
like,
is
that's just the craziest thing to think of in that moment.
Oh, that
But
is awesome.
yeah, so what about match of the
Man,
week? What'd you
dude,
vote?
I can't get away from Nakashima here. Nakashima. I took Wawrinka beating Nakashima. This kind of goes into the bet a little bit. I think Nakashima is going to be a little pissed off. I think he's going to play a little extra well. But no, I mean, obviously I wanted to take the final for the match of the week, you know, but
It was
I think
yeah, to be honest,
it
like there
was
was one match of the
undisputed.
week
Yeah,
and it was the
exactly.
final.
It made every other match when I was looking back at the scores like, oh,
Yeah.
but anyway, I mean, this is one of those pity wins that you like to see.
I still don't like that term pity player. Not my favorite term, but
I'm like, yeah, I mean, hey, it's Stan. Come on, it's got to be match of the week. He wins big one against Nakashima pretty easily.
could it be like a nostalgia player? I feel like nostalgia is a
No,
positive
because
emotion.
there's no alliteration there. It has to be pity player. The PP.
Yeah. Just not call him. Just be like, oh yeah, Vavrinka, he's a PP.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just, looking at the score, I was like, all right, good for him.
Yeah.
Good for Stan.
And then obviously,
And
yeah, I went with the final.
oh, you went with the final? Can you
Yeah.
talk about it a little more? I don't think we heard enough about
Yeah.
it.
I mean, I was gonna say I already described it. There's nothing really much other to say about it. Like
All you gotta
that
say is
was maybe
enough
some of the
said.
highest level tennis I've ever seen. Like that was spectacular tennis.
That is just vintage Djokovic, like coming back from cramps, heat exhaustion, winning the match,
Yeah, and
saving match
also, I mean,
points, like crazy tennis.
based on what we've seen from Alcaraz, that's vintage Alcaraz too. Like
Yeah.
Alcaraz just getting to every ball, just crazy athleticism, making
Mhm.
shots where you're like, how the hell did he just do that?
I know. I mentioned it before, but remember the split sliding backhand? That's Djokovic's signature shot, and he pulled it off against him. That was
100%.
fun. That was fun to see.
Yeah. That was
And
it was
then
quite the match.
I don't know if you saw this, but did you see Alcaraz on one of his forehands? His hand cramped up, so he had to grab it with his other hand too and hit like a two-hand forehand. It didn't go in or anything, but it was a long rally, and Alcaraz's hand cramped up and he couldn't grab the racket and just kind of flung it. So that just shows how grueling that match was.
Yeah. I mean,
And-
these guys were just dying out there, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. And that's the show. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Painting Lines Podcast. Feel free to shoot us a DM or email us any questions or thoughts at paintinglinespodcast@gmail.com.